What is up, AR students? How is everyone doing today? Whether this is Friday night, Saturday morning at 6 a.m., Sunday afternoon, whenever you're watching, welcome. I'm so glad that you've decided to join us whenever you're watching this evening. In my case, it's so great to get together to worship, to hang out, to talk about something that matters, even if it's for just a few minutes every week. And even though we can't always get together, spoiler alert, we're going to talk a little bit about that here in a second, so don't go anywhere. But even if we can't gather together all the time, it is still really good that we get to think about God together, even if we're not in the same place. And I have a huge announcement coming. If you guys haven't already heard, Asher Ridge Church is doing these pop-up gatherings all over the place. The first one was at Asher Ridge High School last week, and this upcoming Sunday, we're having our second one at Asher Ridge High School, yet again, right in the front green, right where you would walk into church normally. It's gonna be an awesome time to worship together, and if that wasn't reason enough to show up, we're about to do something unprecedented. We haven't gotten together physically in what feels like 10 years, which would mean some of y'all would be like 2 years old, so that's not really, math doesn't check out there. But it's been a long time since we've gotten together, and this week, we're gonna hang out for the first time in ages. So, listen closely. 6:30 p.m. is when our pop-up gathering is on Sunday. At 6 o'clock, 30 minutes before our pop-up gathering, we're gonna hang out together at Asher Ridge High School. So all you have to do is get your parents to bring you early, cop a ride, hang out with us. Beforehand, we're gonna talk a little bit about the content that we're gonna discuss here in a second once I'm done rambling. And it's gonna be an awesome time together. I've missed seeing your faces. Your small group leaders have missed seeing your faces. It's gonna be a really great time. I can't wait, don't miss it. 6 p.m. on Sunday, right before our pop-up gathering at 6:30. Your parents will hopefully see in their emails and their text messages all the notifications and reminders for that, but I can't wait to hang out together. And so, what are we gonna talk about on Sunday? Well, we're gonna talk a little bit more about this new series that we're in called Into the Unknown. Last week, if you didn't get to catch it, which is available on demand on YouTube, but if you didn't catch it, Will was talking to us about how courage isn't really not being afraid of anything. And we talked about how everyone's afraid of something, and that's natural. That's okay. It's okay to be scared of things, but it's not okay to get stuck there. It's not okay to let fear control your life, and that's where courage comes in. Will told us that courage is choosing to trust God, even if you're afraid. Despite being afraid, you can still choose to trust and follow God's lead in your life. And that's what being courageous really means. So if you're still afraid of things, that's all right. You can still be courageous. You can still be bold and trust God in those moments. So this week, we're gonna talk a little bit more about this idea of how we handle the unknown. We're gonna talk a little bit about two groups of people. Well, one group of people, two different generations. We're gonna talk about the Israelites right after they came out of captivity in Egypt and them wandering in the desert, Moses, Joshua. It's gonna be a great time. Jen is gonna lead us, not Pastor Jen, a different Jen. She's gonna tell us all about it, and I'll be back right afterwards to discuss it. Y'all check this out.
Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Jen McGee, and I am so excited to be here today as we continue our series Into the Unknown. You know, each week and each day, we're gaining more and more understanding of what this uncertain time looks like and what we can expect. But the truth is, there's still so much unknown. And we're always going to be asking the question, how do I deal with this unknown? How do I deal with this situation, this season of uncertain times? Whether you know it or not, your parents, your grandparents, the people who are raising you, your step-parents, your aunts and uncles, they've influenced the way that you handle the unknown. Just like you've learned how to cut your sandwich, right? Maybe you're cutting it in half, maybe on the diagonal, maybe in 4 squares. You learned that from someone. Someone influenced the way you cut your sandwich, and you probably don't even think about it. You just naturally cut your sandwich. Well, the same is true with how we deal with the unknown. We've learned the way to handle these kind of situations from those who have influenced us. And so this week, we're gonna look at 2 generations of people back in history. We're gonna look at how they faced the unknown and how their stories are totally different and what we can learn from both of them. Our stories begin with Moses. See, Moses was chosen by God to pull the Israelites out of Egypt, out of slavery, and enter into this land, this promised land that God had given them. This was going to be their home, it would be their nation, and it would be their future. And so as they're wandering to the land and they get to this land, Moses, he's left and he's charged. He's like, I'm going to send these spies in to see the land, make sure we're good to go, because after all, it's super unknown. We doesn't know what to expect. But God has said that we could do this. And so let's look at what happens for Moses as he sends spies into the land to see what's going on and can we do this. In Numbers chapter 13, verse 30, it begins with, Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do this. But then the men who had gone up with him said, We can't attack these people. They are stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report that the land they had explored. They said, The land we explored devours the living in it, and all the people we saw there are of great size. So here's Moses and this generation of people. And God has told them, trust me, go into the promised land. I will protect you. I will provide this land for you. But they're left with fear. They're left with, half of the spies saying we can do it, but the other spies are saying we can't. And so Moses is faced with, what do? Do I trust God and enter in this land? Or do I trust these spies who say we can't do it? We're not strong enough. And you know what? Moses and this generation, they didn't trust God. And so they were left with 40 more years of wandering in the desert, in the wilderness, without a home and without a nation. Fast forward 40 years, and Joshua is ready to enter the promised land that God had provided for he and his generation. He sends spies into the land just like Moses, but here's what they came back to say. In Joshua 2:24, they said to Joshua, The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us. What a difference. Here's Joshua and Moses tasked with the same thing. Leave the wilderness, trust God, enter the land. And they approach it totally different. So what happened? What changed for Joshua's generation? And the thing is that Joshua and his generation had spent 40 years watching their parents not trust God. But they had watched God continue to provide for them and protect them. They continued to watch God have a plan, God have the details, and God protect them along the way. You see, Joshua and his generation, they didn't need to know all the details of how they were going to take this land. They didn't need to know all the details of how they were actually going to get to the goodness of this land, get to the end of God's plan. But they knew that they could trust God. They had learned that along the way while walking in the wilderness, that God was there with them, that God never left them, and that God provided for them. So Joshua and his crew, they didn't have the details, right? And that's kind of true for us in this season. We don't know the details of the unknown. We don't know the details of how we're going to get to the end of this season and what life will look like. But we know that we can trust God. In fact, you probably do this in your life without even realizing it. I know I do. Every time I get on an airplane, I trust the pilot. I may not say that out loud. I may not actively know I'm even doing that, but I get on that plane and I know that I'm going to get to my destination safely. Do I know the details of how the plane is flying? No. Do I know how fast it's going? Do I know what altitude we're at? Do I know really even the path we're taking? I have no idea, but I am trusting that the pilot has done his job, that he is protecting me, that he is going to get me safely to my destination. He's going to do whatever he can to get me there. And so what does that look like? How do we trust God in this season? How do we trust that his plan is good? Because after all, being the center of God's plan, his good plan, man, that's the best place to be, right? And what would it look like if we trusted God with that? If we trusted God in this season, what would our homes look like? What would our small groups look like? What would our friends groups look like? How would we be on the other side of this season if we trusted God with the details and we trusted that he was in control and we trusted that he had a plan? So as we continue in this season of unknown, I want to challenge you with that. I want to challenge you to trust God, to trust that he has a plan, to trust that his plan is good, and trust that he's got the details under control, that he's going to see us through to the end. And so today in small group, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how scary that could be, but also what could it be to trust God? What could it look like to trust God? We'll see you next week.
Well, thanks so much, Jen. I don't know about y'all, but those words cut right to my heart. They cut deep, right in the feels. I'm the kind of person that likes to be in control. The way she was talking about how she has to give up control to the pilot of the plane she's on, yeah, that resonates with me because I really struggle to give up control. A lot of y'all already know that I'm a huge control freak, but learning to trust God in the middle of those moments where you're out of control, that's key. That is the most important thing that you can learn from today. Whether or not you're a Christian, whether or not you're in this whole God thing with us, it's really important that you learn that sometimes control, we don't have it. And right now, in this season, there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of question marks going on in the world, whether it's your summer plans, school in the fall, sports, band camp, the list goes on. All of these question marks, all of these things that we just don't know what the future holds for us. And for me, that's scary. For me, every single day, I feel like I'm faced with a new decision that I'm having to make without enough information, without enough details. And that's the exact same thing that was going on in the story that Jen was telling about the Israelites. Moses brought these people out of the land of Egypt. They went through the Red Sea. She didn't mention that. God split the Red Sea into two pieces and they walked on dry ground, which is crazy. God did that. Then God said, hey, this land I've set out for you, I've promised it for you. That's why we call it the promised land. And that's where you're gonna be. That's where you're gonna live. That's your new home. And these people, when they got there, they got scared. They saw that the people there were huge and scary, and they just didn't go in. And so they wandered in the desert for 40 years. And I don't know, like 40 years doesn't really settle with me. I'm only 27, so it's almost 2 of my lifetimes of them wandering in the desert. That would be like if you were born at the middle of them still wandering in the desert, you would still not be out of wandering in the desert right now. Like, that's a long time to be in the desert. And then Joshua, he gets to be in charge. He gets to take the reins after Moses moves on. And Joshua's people, the same people, don't have any extra information, but they see the promised land and they go in because they've learned to trust God. Those 40 years were a long time coming, but it was 40 years of trusting God, 40 years of faith, 40 years of seeing what God can do and that God will always keep his promises. And so Joshua's people, they didn't have extra information. They didn't know what was over the hill. They didn't know what was on the other side of the river, and they still chose to trust God. And that's where we are. That's what this story means for us. We don't know what's on the other side of the river or on the other side of the hill or on the other side of the end of June or August, but we can still choose to trust God because we know God has been faithful to his promises in our lives already. And that's what we're going to talk about on Sunday. I want to leave you all with the same question that Jen left you with. What could it look like if you trusted God in your life all the time, every day? What would it look like if you trusted God? How would that change your life? How would that impact the relationships you have, the effort you put in at school, the way you treat your parents? What would it look like if you trusted God with everything you had? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that on Sunday, in-person hangouts, right before Asher Ridge Church's pop-up gathering at Asher Ridge High School. It's going to be at 6 o'clock. Pop-up's at 6:30. We're hanging out at 6. 6:30, 6. 30 minutes before, really easy to remember. Don't forget about it. It's going to be an awesome time together. I would love to pray for us, and then we've got a brief time of worship right afterwards. Let's pray. Hey God, thank you for today, and thank you for that incredible story of the Israelites coming out of Egypt. God, thank you for preserving it so that we can grow from it now, and thank you for teaching us what it means to trust you. Just because we don't have all the answers, all the details, all the information, that doesn't mean we can't still trust you, because you're always with us. That's the thing that Joshua wants us to know, is that you are always with us. And so God, help us trust you. Help us learn what trust looks like, even though we're in the middle of an unknown season, unknown possibilities, unknown futures. And God, I pray that you bring all of us together for an awesome time of worship and community this upcoming Sunday. And it's in your Son's name that we pray. Amen.
Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from, oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, He is my song. You are good, you're good. Oh, 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 let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, He is my song. You are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, yes, you are good, you're good. Oh, and you are good, you're good. Oh, you're never gonna let me down. 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 Oh, sing it. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. No, you won't. You're never gonna let me down. Yes, I know it. You're never gonna let me down. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, and you are good, you're good. Oh, and you are good, you're good. Oh, you'll never let me down. You're never gonna let me down. Give you my fear. You're never gonna let me down. Jesus, I trust you. You're never gonna let me down. This I know. You're never gonna let me down. You are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good.